Welcome to this episode of the Modern Day Missionaries podcast. Today's conversation is for every missionary who's ever hosted a short-term team and thought, this was way more exhausting than helpful. Or maybe you're gearing up to receive your next team and you're already feeling the tension, trying to balance hospitality, ministry, logistics, and your own sanity on top of it all. So today we're joined by Jesse and Andrea Kroeze. They're the leaders of Touch the World, which is a missions organization that really mobilizes and equips the next generation of goers. And I think what makes their insight so powerful is Jesse and Andrea don't just send teams. For years they lived in Uganda as missionaries, receiving and hosting teams on the ground. So they get it from both sides of the issue. And so we ask a bold question with them today. How do you make mission teams work for you instead of drain you? And Jesse and Andrea are here to help us really rethink how we engage with short-term teams, from setting good expectations, communicating assertively about what it is we need, incorporating what they do into our long-term vision, partnership. So many of the questions that you most likely have, we talk about today with them. So whether you are somebody who finds yourself dreading your next team or somebody who feels excited and hopeful and you're wanting to plan and do teams better, you will have some great takeaways in this episode with Jesse and Andrea. So with that, let's dive on into the conversation. Hey, Jesse and Andrea, it's so good to have you guys with us today.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Stephanie.
Okay, and we're talking teams today. And what I love about you guys, as we've been chatting about, is you guys are now on the sending side of teams, and you were on the sending side of teams beforehand. And in the middle, you were missionaries for 5 years in Uganda. So you've been on this receiving side. So you guys know from personal experience of sending teams and receiving teams that mission teams can be the hugest blessing or a total nightmare. And honestly, sometimes they're both. They're a ton of work and a big blessing. But I think we also know how important they are. We want to learn how to host them in a way that's great for them and sustainable for us. I just would love to hear from you guys. When you were on the field, did either of you have that moment after a team left where you collapsed in exhaustion and thought, why are we even doing this?
There's always that moment, right? Everybody, anyone who's hosted teams has had that letdown moment of thinking, yeah, why are we involved in this? Why does it matter? Is it really even making an impact? The team that's coming is going home. Are they really going to live this out with the new perspective that they have now that they've seen what they've seen? And was the host ministry that we're, bringing them into impacted in a real and relevant way? So we've absolutely fell down in exhaustion saying, why are we doing this?
And that's real. I know when we served, we had teams come down all the time. We're really an active church. I know the church where we served, I was just talking to them recently, and right now they have 32 teams coming down this year. So they're like team city. And where we lived, we hosted a lot of the teams in our home because we had some apartments kind of behind the house. And there were teams that were phenomenal. I mean, we wished they could stay. They were so helpful, so present, so engaged. And then we had a few teams that it was so bad that they're the type of team that makes you almost think, I don't even know if we can ever even do this again. I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, what do you think it is that makes some of those teams be such a blessing and some not, we'll just say?
Yeah, I think the best teams have the best expectations for coming into the experience. And so what really makes the difference is teams that know what the purpose is and that purpose is the same for the host, right? So a big part is having that connection between the host setting an expectation and the team being aligned in that expectation. Some of our worst experiences, I would say honestly, we didn't really have too many nightmare situations, which we're really grateful for. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that our organization always required training before teams come. And I'm sure we'll get into that later on, of how important that training piece is. But I think some of the most difficult teams that we've had as we've been reflecting on our experience of hosting teams were the times where teams came and they just wanted to follow their own agenda And they had really set expectations on their end of what it was going to be like, and that there wasn't enough communication between us as the hosts and whoever was leading the team or the organization that was sending the team kind of beforehand. And so there was that misalignment on expectations.
That's so key that you mentioned that, because when I think back on our teams, because I will say the majority of our teams were actually phenomenal. There were only two. One was pretty bad, and one was a true nightmare. And you're exactly right, Andrea. It was because they didn't come down through the traditional way. I won't get into the details. I don't want to reveal names, or I don't never know who's listening. All I can say was that they came down in a different way, invited in a different way, and they did. They had completely their own agenda. And it was, that was what really made it so difficult, was this like, we're here to do what we want to do and bring back the pictures we want to bring back. Okay, so because I mean, the whole point of today is really helping missionaries think through how can we host teams better. So how can missionaries improve that communication with those team leaders to help align those expectations?
Yeah, there's so many answers to that question. You could go on a lot of different routes on this. I think for us, we would say the missionary needs to understand what they actually need, and not bend to the desires and wishes of just what the team is looking for. So, like Andrea said, this comes back to level setting expectations. Do we understand truly what our community needs? And I think the answer is yes. If we're living in these communities as long-term missionaries, we do understand our local context. We understand the needs of the gospel, the needs of the ministry that we're doing. But oftentimes I think we're slow to communicate the real needs that are on the ground and how short-term teams can fit in. And unfortunately, I think we're quicker to just assess the team for what the team is looking for. So for instance, what I mean by that is I think a lot of times a church is contacting us and saying, "Hey, we're thinking of coming to you and bringing a team. Can we come? What dates work for you?" And we work out the dates, we work out the trip, team comes, they're a little bit of a disaster and they go home and there's not much impact on either side. I would wonder if there's a better strategy to that for the host missionary in their site where they're doing long-term ministry, to say, you know what, we're only going to take teams that are highly strategic and fit into what we're doing, and teams that understand that they're coming to actually encourage us as long-term missionaries, in addition to doing some practical work on the ground, whether that's construction, evangelism, church planning, whatever it is in your local context. But I think oftentimes we're too quick to just assess a team at face value for hosting a team's sake, or maybe it's an income question of this is part of our budget and we just need to have teams. I think we need to scratch that and go back to ground zero and say, how are we as the long-term missionaries setting the expectations of what would actually be helpful in our context, and making those expectations fully known, and then filtering out and actually saying no to some teams if it doesn't fit. Are we willing to say, I'm sorry, that doesn't fit into our ministry and that doesn't fit into our vision of where we're moving. Here's another ministry that you can connect with, though, that I know of that does do this, right?
Yeah, I think too, it's establishing a shared purpose for a short-term team, right? So it's more than just setting the expectations, but having a shared idea of what's the end goal of this. So I think where some of the misalignment often happens is the team itself might have an end goal of, we want to go to such and such place and we want to accomplish XYZ. We want to help the ministry there, right? We want to be a part of the ministry there. Whereas for the missionary host, that may not be the purpose per se, right? The missionary host may have a perspective of, I want to be able to share with this team what God is doing here. And so it's more of a show and tell rather than like a come and do. And so we have to find alignment on the shared purpose of short term. And I think this is how short term has gone wrong for a long period of time, is that it hasn't been connected strategically to a long-term vision, because short-term trips have been seen as, we're just going to go and accomplish something and get something done, and it's about a task that we can do, rather than seeing how can these short-term experiences actually be part of the long-term work that's going. So, for example, we tell all of our teams, if you don't finish the project, if you don't accomplish any specific task, that's okay. The most important thing that you can do as you're going to serve is to bless and encourage the missionary or the local ministry so that they can continue to do the work that they're doing. And in that way, you're actually helping this long-term work and being a part of this long-term work. You're stepping in for such a short period of time. And I think sometimes when the short-term team might have this expectation of like, we're going to accomplish so much, you might be there for 7 days, right? Like, really, how much are you going to accomplish? Not that much at all. But what you can do in that short period of time is see the work of God happening in that place and get to share in that and get to participate in that and witness what God is doing so that you can come back and tell the rest of the church, right? And encourage those back home. And hopefully what you've seen and how you've been impacted by seeing the way in which the missionaries are living and serving God will also impact the way that you're going to serve and live God in your everyday life.
Yes. And all the missionaries said, amen. I mean, that's it. That's what you really hope is you hope a team will come and be a part of that larger vision. But I do think there are a lot of teams, and there are a lot of teams that are great, who get it. But there are a lot of teams still, I think, coming over from earlier years where this was more the modus operandi of like, this is about our agenda. This is about how many salvations we come back. Well, we do street evangelism. So we need you to create a street evangelism opportunity for us. Mm-hmm. And so the missionary, like you were kind of saying, Jesse, would kind of customize and change what it was they were doing to fit the team, which is disingenuous because it burns out everybody on the ground. And then it gives this team this false sense of they've accomplished so much, when in reality, they just strung, burnt out missionaries and not really left much to come back with. Mm-hmm. So it's that whole adage, teach people how to treat you. And I think you nailed it, Jesse, when you were saying, I think sometimes it's a financial thing. Like we need a team to come down, or we need our supporting church to send a team down so they continue to support us. And not that it's just that, but it's a part of that. We need supporters. We need finances to be able to do what we do on the ground. So of course we want to create those spaces for particular churches. But if we betray who we really are and what our calling actually is to receive those, to your point, it's better to not do them. And I think that if you're with a church who really gets you, who really loves you, they're going to respect the fact that you say, this is not the right fit for us right now. Mm-hmm. Or I was talking to somebody who plans teams the other day, and it was all these churches wanted to come at the same time or go to all these different places. And she was saying, okay, we have to think things through next year and say, we can only do this many per month and set this out and only go to these particular places and figure out what's best for us so we don't fry out. And I think that is a critical piece, is what's going to burn you out. If you're setting yourself up for failure to make a team happy, that's not really what the Lord's calling us to do. So how can we set ourselves up for success and really maximize the value of these incredible teams? I mean, it's so good to have them down. They get so energized and excited when they get to go back and share the stories. So let's give them an actual, real, meaningful experience that's beneficial to us as well. I'd love to ask you guys, because you did this as a couple, as we talk through some of the stress points that teams can have on us, even a good team, there's just, it's hosting, and some people more naturally host than others. What do you see as being some of the most common stress points, whether it's on your relationship, emotionally, physically? What were those for you guys?
Yeah, I'll jump in with maybe one or two here. I think to start, the biggest one is simply that as a missionary, you feel this expectation of you are hosting, and you're kind of like this spiritual giant for the week, right? So missionaries, I think oftentimes are even put on a pedestal above pastors and viewed as these spiritual elites. And so you have a team coming out to you and you're dealing with everyday messes, right? You're dealing with life, you're dealing with junk, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's in your family, your kids, relational issues in the community, whatever it might be. The team is entering into that. And so you do have to put up a level of protection to some degree, right? They're only coming in for a week. And so I think every missionary struggles with, how real can I actually be? Right? Yes. How much can I actually let people in? And I think is determined to the degree to which you're partnered together. If it's the elders of your home church coming, and they're truly coming as a care visit to check up on you and pray for you and just be with you and see where the ministry's at, then you can probably go deeper and ask for prayer and some of those things. But if it's just simply a team from a church that you know vaguely well, but you're not necessarily fully partnered with them, you're not going to share any of that. And so I think there is that family dynamic where you're almost laying everything down for a week and saying, I'm just going to put all my personal stuff aside. I'm going to put all of our marriage stuff aside, all of our family stuff, and I'm going to be with this team 24/7, and then we'll get back to real life when the team leaves. And that's, I think, unfortunate that we have to do that or even feel that we have to do that. And it can be a real detriment to both our family, the ministry, and the team.
And it also perpetuates this kind of stereotype or ideal of the romantic version of being a missionary living overseas, right? And so you have a team come for 1 week and they're like, this was the best experience of my life. I loved it. You know, I got to do so many things and God worked in my life and I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit and I got to experience a new culture. And so they go for 1 week and then they're like, I want to move there. And you're like, you don't know exactly what it is that what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And so in some ways, I feel like because missionaries may have to feel as though they can't fully be transparent about just the hard parts of everyday life that they still have to deal with when a team comes and kind of put on their best face, it perpetuates this romanticized picture of what it looks like to live overseas. And I think that that's a real detriment as well to the body of believers, because if someone's really responding to the call, they need to know that there's going to be a lot of sacrifice and suffering that's associated with that call, right? But if they're responding based on the fact that I had this amazing time for 7 days and I just want to live my life that way, they're going to be sorely disappointed. So I think there's holding that tension of the stress of the emotional side of saying, how do I be transparent enough with this team so that they have an understanding of like, this is hard work that God has called us to, and it's not always easy. And even though we might be showing you some of the best parts of the culture and our ministry over the next 7 to 10 days, the reality is it's still really hard, and we need you to be praying for us when you go home. To not just go home and say, this is incredible, you know, like let's say all the great stories of the ministry, but to really also go home and say, we need to be praying for these missionaries who are doing this work. We need to be remembering them and the sacrifice that they're making, but just for the conditions that they're in, that can be really hard, just everyday life being so stressful for many different ways, depending on where you're living and what the cultural, implications are of that. But I think that's definitely a tension for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you guys bring up about that transparency, about letting them into your lives. And as you said, Jesse, you can't let them all the way in. Not every team gets to know everything. But there is a degree in which, like you were saying, Andrea, you want them to get to see some of the realities of your life. So it's this equal mix of like positivity and excitement, and we are making a difference because you want them to be fueled up and giving them a little dose of reality too. Like, here are some of the challenges we're up against. Here's a place where we've been serving and we haven't seen a lot of fruit, but join with us right now in this faithful act of doing what we're doing. And so today, team, it's not about numbers. We're not going to see numbers here today. Today is about doing a hard, dirty task that we're not even going to finish. But this is a part of what missionary life is. So what great thoughts as they're kind of designing that week. What recommendation would you give to them as they're designing that week of things to do with the team? Obviously, for each person, it's very unique depending on their ministry. But what would be some really important things that they could build into that week to give a team an exciting and authentic experience?
Coach Ben here. Are you a missionary? Are you trying to find next steps to becoming one? Well, Modern Day Missions, we're a payment processor for missionaries just like you. You may be thinking like, payment processor, what is this guy even talking about? So let me break it down. We make it simple for you to receive donations and for your donors to give. It's as easy as that. As the largest independent missions organization in the U.S., we currently serve more than 1,100 missionaries across the globe, helping missionaries get on the field and freeing them up to do what matters the most, what God's called them to do. Now you may be thinking this guy isn't so crazy after all. It kind of sounds like he's talking about me. Well, I want you to know we're always thinking about you and how we can best serve you. So we want to connect you to resources designed to help you flourish, like this podcast you're listening to right now, and a full-time staff that's dedicated to helping you with your admin, and free access to me, a fundraising coach, among many, many other things. So don't take my word for it. Check out everything at modernday.org. It's right here. It's pinned to the corner. Just click that link. And like I said, it's free, and we'd love to serve you. Now, I know you're here to listen to Stephanie talk, not me, so let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements that we could list as we go down it. I think just a bird's eye view on that answer, I would say first and foremost, you need to fit into whatever the local ministry is doing and not demand as a team that, hey, we'd love to come and do a VBS. Is there a possibility of that? Because that's a leading question, and many missionary hosts are going to say yes, unfortunately, even if there's not a great fit in plug-in for a VBS. They'll say yes because maybe they don't want to lose that church partnership, or that church is a supporter of theirs and they just are afraid to say no. And so we have to be careful on the short-term side or on the church partnership side to not ask leading questions, but simply to say, how can we come and serve the long-term missionary? But likewise, that onus is kind of on the long-term missionary to say, hey, we're looking for people to do these things because they fit into our ministry initiatives right now. And so if you're looking to come do these other things, that's not going to line up with us right now. But unfortunately, again, this all comes back to those expectations, right? If we're not level setting those expectations and having honest conversations with our partners about what we need, and we're okay saying no to a team, I wonder how many long-term missionaries are really willing to say no. I hope they are, because that's where you start to really see the fruit of good teams coming out and partnering for the right reasons, rather than just saying yes to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think along that line, for us, now that we're on the side of sending again, like a red flag for us is when a host that we're talking to, maybe that we're going to be serving for the first time, just comes back and says, well, what does your team want to do? Right? That's a red flag. We want to work with and send teams to hosts who are very confident in saying, this is what our ministry does. This is what a normal week looks like, right? These are the things that we're doing. Or we have a dream to do this particular program, and we know we can't do it alone. We know we need extra hands to do it. So could you come and do this program? So with that in mind, when it comes to kind of planning the trip, in some ways, it should be just inviting them to do what you're doing on a regular Tuesday, right? Like, what are you already doing in your regular week? Like, getting them to see the everyday ins and outs of the life of the ministry, whatever the ministry context is that you're serving in. And so not necessarily planning tons of extra activities that are outside of that. But another huge thing, at least for us in our experience when we were living in Uganda and we were in a pretty rural area, was giving the team the best taste of the culture as possible, and to get as close to the culture as possible. So for many teams, they might have a very small, limited view, story, even stereotype of where they're going. And we want to break that down. We don't want them to come, experience the exact same thing that they thought that they were going to experience, and then go home and reiterate that story of, all of Africa is like this, right? We want to break it down. And so one of the things that we were really conscious of in our trip planning when we had teams coming was getting the people as close to the ground as possible. So that involved actually staying in our remote village, not staying in the hotel, 20 minutes away in the bigger city, working alongside people in their daily lives. But also getting to see both the beauty and the brokenness of the culture, right? So being able to experience maybe the poverty or the brokenness, whatever it is that exists in that place that you as a ministry are kind of trying to address, but also getting to break down the fact that not everybody is like this, or it's not all hopeless, right? It's not all despair. It's not all poverty. There's actually incredible beauty. So being able to kind of give opportunities where they're experiencing various elements and sides of the culture so that they don't return home with just a single story of what that culture is like. Those were some of the things that we would really intentionally weave into our schedules for our team, in addition to just inviting them along to whatever was happening.
Yeah.
And one practical thing that I'll add into that, just to finish off that question, was we would always make a meal with a local family that we're already ministering to, that's already in our network, part of the team experience. And we would usually build that into the budget. So we're giving this local family that we know for us, it was in a rural village in Uganda, in northern Uganda. And we're partnering with this one family saying, hey, we'll give you $100 to go out, get everything you need to host a feast for a team of 20. And they'll get, this is the greatest thing they've ever experienced, to be able to tell them they can host somebody, which number one is like an honor in the culture. But also you're providing, the funds to be able to do that. And then they're able to make it so uniquely cultural, and they invite us into their home. And for us in that context is usually just a mud hut. And so the teams are sitting around in a mud hut and we're eating with our hands, and just really beautiful. And a lot of times those were some of the more impactful takeaways that the team had out of that whole experience.
I bet. Oh, these are some great ideas. I bet these are generating a lot of new thoughts for people who are maybe thinking of different ways of doing teams. And I want to jump back to what you said a minute ago, Andrea, too, about how it makes you nervous when a missionary is like, whatever you want, we can just design it to meet your guys' needs. Right. I think that's challenging for people. And I'm glad that we're challenging missionaries in that way, to say, no, what do you need? What is best for you? How can the team, again, come alongside what you are already doing? Again, at the church we served at, Camino de Vida, who still does teams, one of the best comments that they continue to get, and that we got when we hosted teams down there, is, we love that we get to join you guys in activities that we know you're doing week in and week out, even if we're not there. So they might be a part of food distribution, or part of wheelchair distribution, or all these different activities. And there was a team of people at the church, of volunteers, who did this week in and week out. And so they came in and plugged into what was already going on. And so for missionaries, think about, what am I already doing? If you're a new missionary and you're just getting established, that might be more difficult to think of. But there's got to be something. Like, there's something that you can get going where you're doing a regular type of service that the team could be a part of. And maybe even when the team is down there, they can help you generate and think of some ideas. But when it's not meaningful is when an idea is invented for a team. Like, oh, let's all go pass out water bottles in the middle of downtown, or something that's just like not going to really be impactful. I'm not saying it's never impactful to give out water bottles. There's times where that might be very impactful. But is it a part of what you already do? Is that something that you've seen make a difference already? And so that's why you want to do it. But yeah, when it's these flash in the pan activities, and I gotta think that the really perceptive team member is going to pick up on that. I think for some people, they're like, oh, this was so fun. But for somebody who's really perceptive, they're going to observe, this doesn't feel normal, because you're even going to see the missionaries and they're going to look like they're out of their element. So it's authenticity, which you guys brought up earlier, is so huge in all aspects of our ministry, including when we host teams. So these team visits, they impact not only just you as a person, as a couple, as a family, but they're also impacting the team of people that you serve with. If you're at a church, maybe your volunteers. If you're in a ministry down there, the people who are part of that team. So how can missionaries not only set up themselves, but set up their teams around them to thrive during a visit from teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm imagining this team that you're talking about handing out water bottles, right? And thinking about it's really important, I think, for the missionary who's hosting to be thinking, am I setting up something so that this team can walk away kind of getting the glory and looking like the hero? Or are we going to have the team involved in things that's going to have the people in the community recognize that it's the ministry that's supporting this?
Yes.
Right? Because we want to communicate that expectation to the team to say, for the long-term impact of this trip, the ministry or the missionary or the church, right, on the ground needs to be the hero. Because if you're building any kind of connection, they're not going to find you here next week, but they can find this ministry that you're saying you're a part of. And so I think that's one thing, even in the way that we're preparing the rest of our team that might be working with us, our family, the staff that we might have working alongside us. Like, we want the team to know that these are the people that we want to point people to, right? When it comes to any sort of relationship building, we have to recognize as well that the team is only going to be able to do something on the short term, but any long-term follow-up is going to happen with the team that's on the ground. And so we want to be utilized in the short-term capacity to build the bridge to the ministry that's there on the ground. So I think that's one thing that we can do. Do you want to share maybe about our local staff and how we would prepare them for teams?
Yeah, so I think anybody who's working in an international setting, especially with a team of people who, the visiting team, it would be a cross-cultural exchange, right? For our local team members who are not Americans, but they are from the local culture that we're serving in, I think we do want to have trainings on what is it like to deal with Westerners. Hopefully we're already training them on that because they have to deal with us every day.
Right.
We are Westerners and have some Western values that just come out in all sorts of ways. And certainly different contexts and different cultures and countries, that's going to be more extreme and exacerbated than others that are maybe closer to a cultural, an American culture. But we need to be training our staff on, hey, team members, when they come over, they are just coming for 1-2 weeks, maybe a month. And this is an experience where it's going to be hard for them as much as we're asking them to fit into the local culture and act in a way that would not do any harm to you and the way you believe and the culture that they're serving in. We do want to make sure that we are training them on what is it like to deal with Americans, training them on how to ask questions. So we would train our local Ugandan staff on, hey, if you see something that just confuses you, simply ask them. And we had a lot of funny moments where our local, national staff would be like, hey, you Americans do things like this. And we, Ugandans do things like this. Tell me why you would do this as an American, and just really funny exchanges. But I think curiosity is really the key there, right? Asking questions and curiosity. Are we having a curious spirit, whether we're on the receiving side or the hosting side? And I think for those of us hosting teams, we need to be quick to teach our team members, our national team members, to also have those values of curiosity and asking before assuming, because Americans that are coming into our host context are going to say things that are dumb, do things that are dumb, and our national kind of host ministry leaders can help them navigate if they know, oh, they don't necessarily know any better. So let me ask them questions to lead them towards, hey, that's not really the best way to do it here in our local context.
Yes, so good. Okay, I want to come in here for a second. We've talked a lot about the difficulties of teams because it's real. But what would you say to the missionary who's listening to all this and they're like, see, this is why I don't have teams. It's like harder than doing the ministry myself. I don't even want to have teams. What would you guys say to somebody like that?
I think there's so much value in having teams because it's an opportunity to, well, let me back up and say this. The question maybe, or the statement is probably the wrong starting point of saying, I can do this ministry better, right? Of course you can. You have been prepared for this. You are living in the context, like you know the people, you know all of the things that these visitors don't necessarily know. That goes back to what are the purposes of the trip, right? And if the purposes are just to accomplish ministry of doing XYZ, then yeah, it's probably not worth the time to do it. But if we can come to a common shared understanding that the purpose of the trip is for us to collectively, as the global body of Christ, witness what God is doing, then it changes the perspective of how we're receiving those teams. And so if there's a missionary out there who's like, I don't know if I should be hosting teams, I would encourage you to say, without hosting teams, you're neglecting parts of the body of knowing what God is doing here, right? For us, when we received teams, there were times where we felt so discouraged. We had gone through months and months of just really hard things that we were navigating in ministry, not seeing progress, not seeing fruit, not seeing results. At least that's what it felt like to us, right? When you're stuck in it day after day, it's hard to notice the progress. But it's kind of like seeing a family member, a young, niece or nephew who you haven't seen in 2 years, and then you see them again and like they're all grown up and you notice the differences, right? That's what teams can provide. They can provide for the missionary a new kind of fresh set of eyes to say like, wow, look what God's doing. And we had some teams where there were a lot of people who returned, a year, 2, 3 years later, and they were just blown away by the things that they saw and the changes that they saw that sometimes for us, we just couldn't recognize in the day in and day out. So one of the greatest blessings of teams is having somebody come and help just give you fresh eyes as the missionary to say like, oh yeah, God is at work here. And I've just kind of taken my eyes off of that. I've gotten stuck in the day to day, and I need to actually step back and celebrate what God has done. So I think that's one piece of it. And then the other side is being able to go home and tell those stories to other people, and to provide like a larger network of support for you to keep doing the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And with teams too, it's working with your personality. I know for some people, they're like, I love having teams. They're just extroverted and excited and hosting is their jam. And then you've got other people who are just, maybe they're more introverted, or maybe they love people, but groups can feel overwhelming. And I feel like God sees you, God knows you, and there are ways to do it that are sustainable. So figure out what those are for you. Is it pulling in, as you guys have mentioned, some of the team there on the ground who maybe are awesome hosts? Is it taking turns? I know when we had teams, I couldn't go every single day on a team. Like Danny and I, my husband and I, we would take turns sometimes, or we might bring in one of our other missionary team members to host them for a day. So feeling like you need to do every moment of every day is where I really see people burn out as well. So work, yes, with your personality, work with your ability, as you guys have talked about today so well. Work with the ministry that you're already doing. There are ways to do this, and ways that are sustainable, so that we don't fall to either of those two extremes. The like, no way teams are the worst, or we need to have teams 24/7, burn myself out till I can't even do my regular ministry anymore because I've become all about teams. There's a way to do it that's sustainable. And so, for people, hopefully this has given them some ideas. Maybe if they don't know how to do it, it's connecting with another missionary who seems to enjoy doing teams and finding out some of the ways that they're doing it. But I believe that, as you guys have said, teams are important. I mean, so many of us became missionaries because we went on a short-term mission trip when we were younger. And so how can God use us to help fuel mission in other people, whether it's having them become missionaries, become a part of what we're doing, or becoming a part just of advocating for missions in their church? So yes, I believe God has it for us. As you said earlier, Jesse, I think it's seasons. I think it's time. I think it's being specific. Andrea, you mentioned communicating your needs, which I think is huge. And you setting the terms. This is what we can do. This is what we have to offer, and not being pressured into being something other than who we are to make it work for a team. So much in what you guys shared today. Thank you for all that you mentioned. How can people learn more about your ministry and what it is that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so our ministry is Touch the World, so you can find us at touchtheworld.org. Today, what we primarily do is we equip and train in pre-trip short-term missions training for youth trips specifically. But we have taken our curriculum that we have developed, and most of that curriculum was developed from our side when we were living in Uganda and hosting teams. So when we were hosting teams, we found that even though our teams were coming trained, there were some major gaps in what they were trained in. And so we just started developing curriculum as to what would we want our teams to know when they got here. And so that now forms the basis of our training curriculum that we use with groups in person before they go out on short-term teams. But we also have curriculum available online. And that's probably the best place for your listeners to go to. And that's at themissionsacademy.com. So we have online courses that they could encourage their teams to go through before they come and serve with them. And we also have group training curriculum as well for youth and adult teams or mixed teams of any kind. And I think that they would find that really helpful in just preparing teams well for those expectations of really what is the purpose, right, of this experience, and how to really partner together, and how to have some cultural understanding, and even just a recognition of, I might encounter material poverty in a way that I've never experienced before. How do I make sense of that? And how do I not go into that situation just with my wallet open and saying, I want to fix all of these things, right? How do I partner with the missionary on the ground who's trying to alleviate some of that poverty or brokenness, however they're experiencing it in their context, in a way that will actually be sustainable and really helpful in the long term.
So good. So a missionary who has a church say, we want to send a team down. They can be like, hey, I know where you should go first as you get ready to send your team down.
Absolutely.
So that you're all set to come serve with us. I love that, you guys. Thank you for all that you do. Thanks for being with us today. Absolutely love what you shared. And I really do believe this is going to give missionaries some fresh ideas and fresh hope that teams can be great and they can host them and host them well without losing themselves in the process. So thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Hey, missionaries, I've got a question for you. How are your finances on the field? Also, are you feeling supported by your senders? At Modern Day Missions, we make it simple for missionaries to receive donations and for their donors to give. As the largest independent missions organization in the U.S., we process donations from more than 1,100 missionaries to and from countries all over the world, helping them get on the field and freeing them to focus on what they're called to do. And we also create and connect missionaries to resources that help them flourish on the field, like this weekly podcast, fundraising coaching, and our resource-packed newsletter. So connect with us at modernday.org to explore our free resources and discover how we can serve you. We're so glad you joined us today.